For more, we have joining us today Dr. Jung-yeop, a research fellow from the Sejong Institute. It's good to have you back on the show.
My pleasure.
So, working levels talks between North Korea and the US have concluded after 3 days. But actually, there's very little we know about what they discussed and what results might have come out of it. What do you make of everything that's happened over the last couple of days, though?
As this kind of working level meetings have been highly anticipated since the Singapore summit last year, I think it's very positive development on the Korean peninsula that now we finally have this kind of working level talks between the United States and North Korea. So as you just mentioned, that it's unclear what kind of outcomes that they have after this meeting, but the beginning of having this kind of working level meeting itself is very meaningful, considering all the struggles that we have in the second half of 2018. So I think we are going to have more of this kind of working level meetings before they can fix the date and the location of the second summit between Trump and Kim.
That report just there as well said that the meetings actually ended a bit earlier than we might have expected. Again, can we consider that a good or bad sign, or is it just too hard to tell right now?
So I don't think that the working level meetings were prepared well before. So what I heard is that this kind of meeting in Sweden and the Vice Chairman Kim Young-cheol's visit to DC is not choreographed but separately planned. So Steve Biegun and Choi Sun-hee, they are not prepared for the working level meetings. So they have to discuss what they are going to discuss in the future in the working level meetings before they can fix the date and location of the second summit. So they are now going to have a preparatory meeting this time, and I believe that they are going to meet again very soon to discuss further in the content of the roadmap to achieve the denuclearization of North Korea. So I believe that there's going to be another meeting very soon.
You talk about the denuclearization process for North Korea. But what was interesting as well over the weekend, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, in an interview that he did on TV, he said that it's actually the aim of the U.S. is to reduce risk and reduce North Korea's capacity to develop its nuclear program. That's quite different from the kind of comments he made a few months ago, where he was always talking about FFVD, fully verified denuclearization. I mean, do you think that's things might have changed a little, and do you think that's the framework now that they're working under for this negotiations?
So if he meant that reducing the threat to the United States is the goal of the negotiation with North Korea, then we have all the reason to be concerned. However, he mentioned that U.S. government has always mentioned that the FFVD, or complete denuclearization of North Korea, is the goal of the negotiation with North Korea. But to achieve that goal, there should be some kind of steps that you have to go through. So I think that tentatively, U.S. government might think of some kind of station to get to the final destination of the denuclearization of North Korea. But it's unclear whether that what Mike Pompeo said in the TV is for the domestic audiences, or whether United States is really changing the direction of the negotiation with regard to the North Korea's denuclearization. So I think we have to see whether U.S. profoundly changes its position toward the nuclear weapons of North Korea.
One unusual aspect about these talks was the fact that South Korea's nuclear envoy was invited to take part as well. So Lee Do-hoon went to Stockholm, and it seems like he was very much involved in these discussions between North Korea and the U.S. What significance should we see in that?
So our focus was given to the talks between Steve Biegun and Choi Sun-hee. However, the format, the platform of the talks at Sweden this time was like track 1.5 conferences. So there was 1.5 conferences, and the conference invited all the related stakeholders on the Korean peninsula, which includes South Korea, North Korea, U.S., and China, and Russia. But now as Choi Sun-hee decide to participate in the 1.5 conference, and Mr. Biegun also decide to take part in the conference. So I think it's natural that South Korean government can also be a part of the conference as a 1.5. But it's now unclear whether there's a three-way negotiation between two Koreas and the United States. So we have to clarify that the format itself was 1.5 conference, and at the sideline there's a bilateral talks between United States and North Korea. So I think it's not strange thing that South Korean government participate in the Sweden meeting.
But South Korea's involvement suggests that there's some sort of outcome that comes out of this, where both Koreas and the United States, all three, are involved. What are some of those possible outcomes that we're looking at?
So I think it's a very positive influence that South Korean government put on in these talks between United States and North Korea. Before that, there are many occasions that South Korean government did not know what's actually going on between United States and North Korea. However, this time, our chief negotiator, Mr. Lee Do-hoon, is actually take part in the conferences, even though we didn't have like three-way negotiations yet at this time. However, talking to North Koreans and talking to the U.S. representative is a good development for South Korean government.
Lee Do-hoon's involvement, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in, he was also very welcoming of these talks and said that South Korea needs to do everything it can to make these talks a success, because South Korea is probably the most urgent the country in the world that needs these talks to be resolved. What should South Korea be doing now? What can they do?
It's true that having this kind of working level talks between U.S. and North Korea is very meaningful, but we have to admit that it's just merely a beginning of the talks. So we haven't had this kind of talks for like last 7 months since the Singapore summit, June last year. So there are two kind of roles that South Korean government can play. First, we have to facilitate this kind of working level talks between two countries, and the second role is that if they show big discrepancies in terms of their approach to the roadmap of the denuclearization, South Korean government can mediate between two countries to achieve the diplomatic solution of denuclearization of North Korea.
We also know that it wasn't just the South Korean envoy who was nuclear envoy who was there. Japan's nuclear envoy also traveled to Stockholm, and he's said to be meeting with the U.S. counterpart as well to try and find out more about what's going on as well. What is Tokyo trying to get out of these talks right now as well?
So what I heard is that as this meeting in Sweden was designed to have a track 1.5 meeting among the stakeholders on the Korean peninsula, so Japan could participate in the conference, but they didn't intend to come to the conference because they don't know who would actually come to the conference. But now they found out that all the important person on this issue actually has arrived in Sweden. They want to be in the part of it. And another issue for Japan is that there's a report, and we just discussed that what if U.S. change its position in negotiating with North Korea? What if U.S. is satisfied with having a deal with North Korea only about North Korea's ICBMs, which make Japan very vulnerable to the North Korea's missile threats? I think that is why Japan dispatched its negotiator to Sweden to see what kind of negotiations are going on between North Korea and the United States.
So they have much at stake as well. But what's also interesting is that North Korea are reportedly seeking, sorry, my bad. So Japan's nuclear envoy is reportedly seeking a meeting with a North Korean counterpart as well. Why do you think they want to? Why does think Japan wants to meet North Korea? And do you see that happening right now?
So Japan has been a important stakeholder since the six-party talks and even before that. So I think that Japanese government wanted to know what is going on by talking to U.S. representative at the same time to the North Korean representative. So by finding out what is actually going on between these countries, Japanese government can set up their position with regard to the denuclearization of North Korea. At the same time, they have these abductee issues as well, and also they are discussing the possibility of establishing the former diplomatic relations with the North Korea. So there are lots of issues that Japanese government actually involved in these talks. So I think it's natural for the Japanese government try to find out what is going on there.
So you say most of the stakeholders, key stakeholders on this issue are there in Stockholm, but perhaps one country that's not represented there at the moment is China. Actually, what's happening in North Korea and China as well, there's a different meeting happening where the North Korean foreign minister and former foreign minister and current vice chairman of the Workers' Party, Lee Do-hoon, has traveled to China to accompany a North Korean arts troupe that is sent to perform there. But we can expect him to meet with Chinese officials as well and discuss what's going on in Stockholm as well, can we not?
So if we remember that in 2015, that North Korean art groups actually arrived in China, but they suddenly decided not to have a performance there. And it shows some kind of relations between China and North Korea since then. So until the end of 2017, the relations between China and North Korea had been very cold. So as North Korea came to the international negotiation with the United States and South Korea in early 2018, North Korea and China tries to re-establish their relations as like back in the Treaty Alliance. So I think that Mr. Lee Do-hoon is going to take advantage of this kind of opportunity to have a discussion with his counterpart in Chinese Communist Party. So I think that North Korea and China, not only at the political level, but also they want to expand their relations in every aspect of their life.
One final factor that I also want to discuss today as well. Another factor at play at the moment is the South Korea-U.S. relationship, because on Monday, the Foreign Minister, Kang Kyung-hwa, is said to have had a phone call with Pompeo to touch base about the latest with the North Korea situation. But concerningly, when reporters asked her about the phone conversation and what was happening with the negotiations on South Korea, the cost sharing of U.S. troops in South Korea, she said deep disagreement remains. Now, how concerning is that comment, especially in relation to negotiations with North Korea at the moment?
So the problem is that we all know that Trump administration has very different approach to this issue compared to his predecessors. And we all know that the U.S. government now wanted to increase the huge amount of money in terms of cost sharing with the South Korean government. So there are certain limits that South Korean government can actually increase the amount how much we are going to pay to the cost sharing. So it's already past due. So now two countries have to show some kind of wisdom to solve these issues without damaging too much on the alliance.
I think my final concern, very briefly, is though that perhaps there's a suggestion that this could lead to even reduction in forces, especially if negotiations with North Korea go well as well. Is that concern real?
So we can discuss the reduction of the forces or reconfiguration of the USFK on the Korean Peninsula if threat environment is changing. However, if this money issue actually leads to the reduction of the USFK, it's going to be a huge damage to the alliance.
Yes, we'll have to see how those negotiations go ahead. Thank you for coming in today and sharing us your thoughts.
Thank you.